Hello, I'm Chris Williams from Read Comics They're Bad For You on YouTube, or if you're watching this on BitChute, at my BitChute channel, Comic Freak. Today we're going to be talking about Jonathan Hickman's House of X. We'll start off with the cover, which was made by Pepe Larraz. He's the interior artist of the book, who was also helped on this cover by Mardif Garcia. The cover is boring. It has presumably Xavier, who looks very effeminate, with being flanked on either side by the X-Men and Magneto. The cover is just boring. It's generally just them walking towards the reader. They are, of course, emerging out of one of the portals that are going to be prominent in this series. They are created by the mutant island Krakoa, as well as being helped along by the mutant Cypher. And all I can say is the cover is just boring. And of course the first page is with dialogue words from Xavier. And they are a bit interesting, and he says, "Humans of the planet Earth, while you slept, the world changed," by Professor X. Now, all I can say is this really doesn't sound like Xavier. It sounds like something Magneto would say. And of course the first page is just that. It's just a white first page. Now the story actually begins where we're inside the island of Krakoa. And it looks like we're looking at a bunch of seed pods. But guess what? These pods are actually big enough to contain people stored inside of them. And who's actually stored inside of these pods? Being overlooked and watched by, well, we all assume the guy with the big X helmet on his head is Xavier, but we don't have any real reason why he would be. We've never heard that Charles Xavier has returned from the dead, unlike, well, Wolverine and Cyclops, as well as Phoenix. All we know is we see this guy who's a telepath with this big round ball over his head, claimed to be Charles Xavier. And guess what? He stored all of the X-Men in these pods. The artwork here by Pepe Larraz is good. It's workable, good artwork for this series. But I have to say, I wish it were a better artist, but I don't think we could have gotten anyone better there at Marvel with what has been going on there. And we continue with the story with the pods opening up. People are emerging out of them. A very familiar redhead and what is presumably, well, the guy who runs the X-Men when he's not bossed around by Xavier, Cyclops. Of course, the redhead is Jean Grey, and they're both being looked down upon by Xavier. I have my doubts that it's actually Xavier. I know it's not Magneto. And it's, well, if that is Xavier, he apparently thinks he's a debutante princess with the way his arms are out like that. And he puts his hand on Cyclops' chin. And presumably, for some reason, Cyclops can control his optic blasts now because his eyes are open, or at least bleeding out energy, and the guy is still alive. I gotta tell you, his helmet is stupid. And he commences to say to all the X-Men around him, "To me, my X-Men." I have my doubts that this is Xavier. I have a theory that who this might actually be. Now, all the X-Men are emerging out of pods, and it looks like they look more like pod people or clones than the actual X-Men. This all smacks to me of brainwashing, or at the very least, these aren't the actual X-Men. This could be just horrific abominations he created to use as weapons, and all the X-Men are actually dead. The X-Men commence to use flowers that have been harvested from Krakoa to start spreading them throughout the world. The Beast is in the Savage Land planting flowers, and Shadowcat, Kitty Pryde, is in Washington, D.C. Kitty Pryde has brought along a sample of the Krakoa flowers with her, and they're growing in abundance next to her. We next move along in the story to where they're part of New York City, or at least this one building that the X-Men are using as an embassy has now basically turned into a giant plant. And other ambassadors from various nations of the world, that includes England and America, as well as China and Britain, They've come there or been summoned there by Charles Xavier. Apparently he's going to make a deal with the nations of the world to give mutants their own homeland. The ambassadors are then greeted by the Cuckoos as well as Magneto himself, who's still wearing that bleach white costume he wears now. And, well, he looks suitably cool, and the artwork here by Pepe Larraz is good. I'm enjoying it. Of course, the coloring could have been better, because sometimes comics that are digitally colored, they forget that you can do some of the same techniques you used to color comics back the 60s throughout the 90s. You could go back to those kinds of ways, and those comics would really pop out now. Now they all look exactly the same, like they're all colored by the same people. Now we move on to Cypher, who's been partially fused to Warlock. Sage, who's making comments about how Cypher has made a language along with Krakoa that mutants can use to make their own place in the world that humans will presumably not be able to break into. See, the language is going to be a key factor in this series, and presumably it's going to be weaponized or used as a way to protect mutants. We then move off into outer space, where we're close to apparently a secret base that's close to the sun. It's being overseen by various governments, and because of what the mutants have done over the last 6 months, well, with Xavier using a bunch of shield companies and getting people to donate money, as well as new technologies built for the island nation of Krakoa. The humans are, of course, worried, as always, that mutants are going to take over the world. And guess what this space station is built out of? It's built out of the head of the Master Mold. And apparently not just any Master Mold. Apparently they refer to it as a mother or a miss. For the most part, Master Molds have no gender, and this doesn't look female at all, so I don't understand. And of course we switch over to Earth as we get through with what the humans are doing with space to find that Mystique and Sabretooth, as well as the Toad, are robbing a base that houses a bunch of technology from Reed Richards and Tony Stark. A bunch of technology and schematics that have failed or been deemed too dangerous to let loose into the world. They're there trying to steal something for the island of Krakoa, the new homeland of all mutants. Of course, the Fantastic Four show up and bash all 3 of them down. Mystique and Toad escape, but they catch Sabretooth. Cyclops comes by and says, "Will you release my fellow mutant there?" And of course they say no, because he's apparently killed a few guards who were guarding their technology. And he says, "Fine, you can have him for now. We'll just break him out in some other way." Sabretooth is angry about this, but this is how this goes right there. He doesn't want to cause, well, Cyclops doesn't want to cause any more trouble. The Fantastic Four ask him if this is really what he wants, to have mutants be the enemy of the world. And Cyclops says, "No, the world's given us no real choice," or something to that effect. Cyclops also says to the Fantastic Four that their son, Franklin Richards, that he's welcome on the island of Krakoa at any time, and he can join the X-Men and the rest of mutant kind there when he wants to. Magneto states Xavier's proclamation that the island of Krakoa is now the new nation of mutants, and that they will brook no humans being there or interfering with them. They, of course, said that they're going to give humankind drugs that will make them live longer, eliminate mental diseases, as a kind of peace offering, but he states flat out saying, "You have new gods now," meaning that he will act as the hammer to Xavier's open hand if they push him. Now, I have to say that Xavier might not actually be Xavier. I have a theory that guy in the helmet might actually be Mutant X, a mutant that Magneto created artificially and that was responsible for him being turned back into a baby. And I have to say that might be what's happening here. It would explain what's happening with the rest of the X-Men. Those might all be clones or artificially created, like the way Magneto created Mutant X. Hell, Magneto might not even be Magneto. He might just be another clone created by Mutant X. All in all, this first issue was heavy-handed with a bunch of characters almost acting out of character, what with Cyclops almost threatening the Fantastic Four, as well as Magneto here almost acting, well, he's acting in character, but it just feels off. This issue was decent, not a great issue. Now, if you like this review, subscribe. Make sure you're still subscribed. If you're watching my videos but you have not subscribed, please subscribe to me. Subscribe to me at YouTube on Read Comics, They're Bad For You. And go over to BitChute and subscribe to Comic Freak. Hit that bell for notifications, hit that like button, and leave some comments down below. And remember, keep checking back in future videos for more information on my own upcoming independent comic book, Scumdogs. I'm Chris Williams, and I'll be back again tomorrow with another video or review.